Um, as a reminder, this is going to be recorded. And if you could just mute yourself till the end of the presentation, and put any questions you have in the chat, we will get to those at the end. Okay, and hi everyone, my name is Rebecca. I'm with AARP ElderWatch, and today we have Jennifer with us. Jennifer worked for 25 years for the Securities and Exchange Commission and is now one of our wonderful AARP Fraud Watch Network volunteers. So she has tons of experience dealing with victims, and also tons of knowledge about investment fraud and how to avoid that. We thank you so much for being here today, Jennifer, and look forward to hearing all of the knowledge you have for us. So I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rebecca. The first thing that we're going to look at is basically social media red flags for investing. And you can go ahead and turn it to the first slide. Thank you, Rebecca. You can go one more whenever you're done with this one. Thank you. The first thing is, as you can see on the screen, claims like 100% return on investment or quote guaranteed returns, they are really big hallmarks of fraud. Even very recently, within the last few weeks of doing Fraud Watch Network phone calls, I got a call from someone who had invested into Bitcoin because she saw someone on Instagram claim that they had 100% return and could get that to her. Now she sent the money by Cash App and they have since disappeared, and she doesn't even have a way to get back her initial investment, let alone the 100% return on investment. And promises of returns like this are usually like this one came, they say little or no risk. And of course, every investment actually does involve risk of some sort. The thing with Bitcoin, especially, and this example that I gave you, is that Bitcoin itself is a highly speculative investment.
Or you're not.
There is no regulation or regulator of Bitcoin. It has a high potential for fraud and manipulation for a lot of reasons, but that's one of the main reasons is because there is no regulation or regulator of Bitcoin itself. Now, funds can trade Bitcoin with futures, which are contracts, and I won't go into what that means, but that they still can have a high degree of risk, even if you're trading Bitcoin within a fund. But at least within the funds, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission is the regulator for those things. And if there's more information you want on that type of Bitcoin investing, you can go to cftc.gov, G-O-V. But Bitcoin itself has no regulator. So if you're a person who just wants to, like this case, takes your money, it is basically theft and it's not a true investment. Also, as the slide says, another examples we have are offers to invest outside the United States. I've seen a few of those as the Fraud Watch Network phone calls. Fraudulent investment schemes are often set up overseas to make it more difficult for the regulators to stop them. Some of the people can get their money recovered, but it happens very seldom. And again, if you're seeing it on social media and it's an offer to invest outside the United States, it is probably more likely or not a fraud that isn't covered by anybody. Then lastly on this, you can see another red flag is the pressure to invest quickly. Again, we suggest that you take the time to think about and investigate your potential investment. And there are a lot of ways you can investigate an investment. A lot of the ways you can, we'll talk about later on and how you can go through those. Rebecca, you can go ahead and turn the slide for me, please. Another reason to be skeptical if you're online and looking at investments is you should be wary of unsolicited offers. If you didn't ask for an investment opportunity or you don't know the person who sent you the opportunity, it's probably fraud. Also, as we show, we've seen a lot of times people have gotten their emails hacked into. And so someone nefarious, a fraudster, will use that email to then solicit someone for an investment. And the person thinks that they know the sender, and then they may then invest money or give money in this case, I'd say. But what they should do is, for one thing, make sure you contact the sender. Even if you think you know them, contact them and make sure they sent it to you. And then again, that person may not even know that the investment is a scam. Even if you know them, they may think it's real, but it's not. And how that happens are two ways. One is a lot of times through what we call an affinity fraud. Those often can't come from acquaintances or friends. I worked more than one affinity fraud while working for the SEC. The ones that were the most prevalent, unfortunately, involved churches, and people within the churches solicited only people in the church to invest in their scams. And in both cases, they were scams. The one that was really pretty large was one where they said they were going to set up an online bank, and the bank was going to be for church members only. They were going to get 0% interest mortgages and 0% interest credit cards. We had hundreds of people that invested in this, and it was a scam. But because they knew the people who were promoting it, and it was from people who were at their church, they felt very safe investing in it. They all lost their money. There were people who were not particularly wealthy. And also some people were getting percentages of their investments to bring them into the scam. So all in all, it ended up being a really bad situation where even acquaintances and friends may or may not have known there was a fraud and brought other acquaintances and friends into the fraud. Now today, with the social media, those scams can often happen within members of online groups, within chat rooms, and people can even pretend to be members of the group now that it's all online. So you don't even know that they're really a member of the group, but they may pretend to be to get access to the group and to get access to their monies. So again, these are all reasons to be very skeptical of what you're investing in. Go ahead and turn the next slide, Rebecca. Now, the first thing you need to do is make sure you can do research on the seller and the investment. This slide basically says you should do research, but what I have found by talking to a lot of people on my Fraud Watch Network calls are that they don't even have the ability to research the seller or the investment. They just go ahead and invest. So I'd say the first step is, if you can't find a way to research the seller or research the investment, run away from it as quickly as possible, because it's very likely to be a fraud. Now, if you can do any research on the seller or the investment, you should first of all check the truth of every statement that you're told about the investment. You can check out a lot of the investments, the actual investments themselves at the Securities and Exchange website. You can go to sec.gov, or you should go to your state securities regulator, and we have the web address there for the Colorado Securities Regulator. But you can do whatever state you're in, they do have a state securities regulator. And often you can check out the actual investment with them. Now, one of the things, excuse me, is that a lot of times, and one of the main things that we looked at the SEC were, again, I'm going to just tell you how easy it was to check out the truth of a statement. So the bank that I just told you about, this online bank they were going to do, well, knew right away that there was a problem there and there wasn't going to be anybody getting their money back from this investment. Now, so that's one of the ways you can do that. There are so many things, but another thing is they will tell you that they're registered with the SEC, the actual investment itself. Again, you can check that out. The SEC has a fantastic website called investor.gov, and you can check there. They have what's called a pause list also. It's PAUSE. You can search for that. That is a list of entities that are not registered with the SEC and that they've received complaints about. So those are basically companies who or entities who've said, I'm registered with the SEC, you can invest in me safely. Someone complained, and they are on a list at the SEC, and you can look it up at investor.gov. The other thing you can do is check to see if the seller is registered as a broker. And as we show you right there, you can do that with FINRA. And there's another way to do that. There's a great website. It's called saveandinvest.org. That's something that FINRA has that you can look at. It will help all investors make more informed financial decisions when they make investments. So FINRA is a really good source too. And then lastly, if they are, say they're some type of investment advisor or a financial professional, in quotes, as they sometimes do, you can go to this website at the SEC and check them out. You could also search for any professional, whether they say they're a broker or an investment advisor, at the SEC website, investor.gov. You can go ahead and turn the slide, Rebecca. Thank you. Some of the common investment scams that I've seen over the years, the first one is a pump and dump or market manipulation. What happens is, especially online now with social media, they put out a lot of false statements to try to get the price of the stock pumped up to a higher price. And the people who are doing this pumping of the stock actually own a lot of stock. And what they're going to do is sell into this higher market that they've manipulated. Then when they've sold everything, they stop promoting the stock and it tanks and people basically have worthless stock. You can find a lot of these on Facebook and Twitter and chat rooms also. For an example, one of the frauds that I investigated and we did prosecute at the Securities and Exchange Commission was one of the really early casinos here in Colorado. And they solicited investments by saying that they were going to open a casino in Central City, and they said they would do it within the year. And it was soon after gaming passed here in Colorado. And then all we had to do then, same thing, to do that, they would have already had to have a license because the licensing process takes quite a long time. So we contacted the Colorado Gaming Board. We were able to determine that they didn't have a gaming license. So we knew that right there was a problem. Also, unfortunately, one of the officers was well known to the staff of the SEC. He had been prosecuted several times for fraud. And obviously, the Colorado Board of Gaming wants you to have a clean record if you were going to run a casino. So we knew that he wasn't eligible to get a license, and the casino itself didn't already have a license. And then the third thing is what we talked about. So this pump and dump took all the spots. The sales were also not registered with the SEC. It was required that these be registered. Now, some people get an exemption, but this one didn't have one. And basically what they did do was pump up the price of the stock, and then they started selling their stock before the price became worthless. And as far as I know, even now, these many years later, the land that they said they were going to put a casino on is still just an abandoned mine, and they've never done anything with it. The second thing that shows on the screen of a common investment scam really has happened online is the fraud using what they call research newsletters and spam emails. They'll send you an email that has a newsletter in it that'll give you a lot of hot stock tips. Now, what happens is a lot of companies actually pay the newsletters to put their stocks in there as recommendations. Now, you'll know that this is not a legitimate newsletter because newsletters need to disclose who paid them to put their stock in there, how much they were paid, and what the form of payment is. So if you get a newsletter and you're not sure if it's one that's legitimate, look and see if there's actually disclosure of payment, of who paid them, how much, and the form of payment. Go ahead, Rebecca, and get the next slide, please. Thank you. Another really unfortunately common scam right now on the internet are high yield investment programs. Again, these have the hallmarks of all the frauds. unregistered investments. They're pushed by unlicensed individuals. They promise incredible returns of 30% or more at little or no risk to the investor. Now, one of the programs that runs under this may be something you've heard of. They're often Ponzi schemes or pyramid schemes, and they're part of the high yield investment programs. They do always promise you an incredible rate of return. And some of the early investors are given that great high to use later money to pay those investors off. Again, one of the things I guess I've seen lately that's even more common is they're actually promising daily returns. So they don't look as high. They're promising like 2%, but 2% daily returns is more and is way more than 30% as at an annual rate. So again, those are just hallmarks of fraud, very much so. Then the fourth one that I have here is using professional designations to attract investors. A lot of people can call themselves financial specialists or retirement advisors. They may call themselves investment advisors. And a lot of times these titles that they've given themselves don't require any training, they don't require any educational background. And again, you just want to thoroughly look into the background of anyone with whom you intend to invest before you give them any money. Now, some of them you can consider is whether they've been registered with the SEC or a state securities regulator. Again, I think we'll show you again the websites at the end so you can check that out for yourself. But it is really risky to invest with someone who isn't licensed. Again, you can go to investor.gov to search to see if they are licensed in any capacity. That would include as a broker or an actual investment advisor. You can go ahead and turn the screen. Thank you. And if you have any questions or concerns about an actual investment that you want to make or think that you've encountered fraud, the SEC, FINRA, the Colorado Division of Securities, they all do want to hear from you. You can actually make a complaint with any of them at these places, and these are great resources to go to. And that's all I have today.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Does anyone have any questions? And if you don't want to say them out loud, you can absolutely put them in the chat.
So I see your question on the list of the pause list. Do the companies get charged and fined? No, that is not necessarily the case. The pause list is simply so people will pause before investing. And the list is great. They just started this very recently. If they've got a complaint, then they'll go look it up to see if it's registered with the SEC. And if it's not, then they'll tell you and it'll be on the list. Now, the information on the list, you can search it for the specific company, and there may be more information. So some of them, it's possible they eventually could be charged and fined. But you wouldn't know that necessarily from just looking at the list. It's really so you know that these entities are not registered and there are complaints that they are saying that they are registered.
Anybody else?
Well, I would say go to the two. There are the two that I want to make sure I get it right. I want to make sure I get this one right because there are two really good ones. One is investor.gov. There are some things on there that are just about fraud, but there are a lot of things on there that are actually helpful for making financial investments. And then the one that I had not known about was the FINRA one, which is called saveandinvest.org. It's geared, there's some of it geared towards the military, but it's actually geared towards anybody in how to make a good investment. And that one is also a really, really good website, saveandinvest.org.
And that question was, for a novice investor, where would you suggest to go to get information about how to make safe investments? So investor.gov and safeandinvest.org, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. And then if anyone else has questions, feel free to stay on and ask those. But if there's no one else that has anything for the good of the group, we should all just thank Jennifer so much for giving this presentation, answering questions, and being an incredible Fraud Watch Network volunteer. Again, this will be recorded for future viewing and put on our YouTube page. And if you have questions, feel free to stay on. But everyone else, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to stop the recording.